What up? Let's do this thing. Another quick Olympic speed run on a Saturday evening as we, things move fast, eh? We are halfway through the Olympics. We are already 1 day short of being done the round robin in the men's hockey tournament. We are down to the semifinals in the women's hockey tournament. And look, I know we've been focused perhaps more than we should be just on the hockey side of it, both men's and women's, but frankly, that's the only thing I feel knowledgeable about. And even that, you can have your own opinion on whether I'm knowledgeable on those things or not. The other sports I'm certainly watching, I'm certainly enjoying, but on my own, am I equipped to sit here and give you 8 or 10 minutes of a diatribe on my opinions on these things? I'm not, right? Like I think they're fun to watch. I think they're fun to discuss. But to sit here and pontificate, which is somewhat obnoxious at the best of times, would be even more so on some of these other sports by myself. With that in mind, I'm not sure if this will be the last speed run before we get a guest back in here. There might be one more, but I will tell you the usual Monday morning show, as is often the case on a long weekend, will be delayed. But it is going to happen. I will be back in studio with Rob on Monday afternoon is when he and I are going to record. I think most of you know we typically do that on a Sunday afternoon for a Monday morning drop. But with it being the holiday long weekend and I've been out of town, we're going to push that back to Monday afternoon, record then. And as soon as it's done, much like these other Olympic shows we've been doing, I will get that out the door. I won't wait until Tuesday morning to release it. So if you're sort of sick of these, hey, I get it. But we will be back in studio with Rob, and that'll drop. Look, it'll be late Monday afternoon or early Monday evening before it drops. And if you want to wait for Tuesday morning, that is certainly still an option available to you. But that is the plan here right now. I don't know whether or not, I guess it'll depend how interesting things get, whether or not I will do another one of these after the final day of the round robin. The Canadian men have France. The American men have Germany. And both will be fired up trying to score as many goals as possible. We'll get to that in a second and what that's going to mean for the last day of the round robin. But if you're sort of waiting around trying to see how the next couple days are going to play out, that's sort of the outlook at the moment. So like I said, probably don't look for that until late Monday afternoon or early Monday evening at the earliest. We'll certainly post on the socials when it's ready. But with that in mind, we have seen some more interesting stuff. I did want to step back in here because, as I said, things are coming fast and furious here. It's just the way an Olympic Games works, right? Every day things change and they change fast. Of course, the one thing that does never change is the need for a pint while we do this. This is from Nickelbrook Brewing Company. I believe it's just called the All Night Stout here. So we'll see how that goes down. I may have had that a few weeks ago. It looks familiar here. Tastes familiar here. Anyway, we'll see. Look, let's start with the women. It will be on semifinal Monday. Canada versus Switzerland and USA versus Sweden, which is not how this was drawn up for anybody. This is actually only the second time in Olympic women's hockey history that the Finns have failed to make it as far as the semifinal. And the Czechs, I think a lot of people expected to be in that Final Four competing for at least a bronze medal, if not a little bit more. It wasn't a great tournament for them. I believe, if I read correctly, they have the third most players in the PWHL after the Canadians and the Americans, of course. And so I think, correspondingly speaking, is that a word? Correspondingly? Probably not. We're going to go with it, though. People expected more of them, right? They've got that kind of talent. They've got that kind of experience playing against top-end players. Carla McLeod, head coach. She's certainly familiar with working to coach talent and how to shut down talent. So disappointing showing for both the Finns and the Czechs. I don't know how much it would have played into it. This was a tough tournament for the Finns. Starting things off with the norovirus and how many of them got ill. I'm told, medical expert that I am, that it's one of those viruses that hits you hard, it spreads fast, but it doesn't stick around long. So that's why they were able to get back up and playing as quick as they did. That being said, you've all been sick before, and if you get it bad enough, just because you're technically not sick anymore doesn't mean you're immediately feeling back up to speed. To have that happen to you at an Olympic Games is brutal. So we did see the Swiss beat Team Finland in their quarterfinal here on Saturday, 1-0. Just Elena Mueller has been a star in the PWHL since she came over. She pots the goal they need, and they hang on and knock off the Finns. The Swedes are an even bigger story. Look, for a long time, they were one of those sort of top 4 or 5 teams in the women's game, and some mismanagement with their program, frankly, some deprioritizing of their program coming out of Sochi saw them go right off a cliff. It seems like they're starting to get their shit together again. They started in that second division. Of course, the women's tournament looks a little different than the men's, where in the men's it's sort of 3 equal isn't interesting, but they spread the teams out based on the world rankings across 3 pools. In the women's game, as many of you will know, the top 4 or 5 teams are in one pool, the bottom 4 or 5 teams are in the next pool, and like the winners of that second pool get to jump up and participate in a quarterfinal. The Swedes were down in that second group, which was awkward enough to see, just Sweden in a second tier in hockey at any level is odd. But they get through that round robin, they jump up, and they manage to win a quarterfinal themselves and will play for a medal here. What color? Well, I'm not sure I would bet on them beating the Americans, but good for them for having made it this far, right? So as far as Canada goes, because that's really where I wanted to get to here. Look, they beat up on the Finns in their final round robin game. I think we've spoken since then. They get the Germans in the quarterfinal. And look, they did what they had to do, right? They got the win. But I'm not enthralled with this women's team right now. I don't know how much of it is coaching. I don't know how much of it is performance. When I railed against this team selection, you heard me say that didn't mean I thought this team was going to be terrible. There's enough talent on this team and in this country and in this program that they should be incapable of being terrible, and they have not been terrible. But they haven't been inspiring either. There's something lacking. And look, I can't watch any more games where Natalie Spooner is getting more minutes than Daryl Watts. That's just not warranted anymore. We're not in that place. I don't know what's happening with Renata Fost, who I had no problem. Like when we talk about selections I wouldn't have made for the roster, Renata Fost was a slam dunk. You take Renata Fost. She's not at a good tournament. She's having trouble holding the line. She's having trouble getting back. I saw her on one of the chances there. I don't think it was against Germany. I believe it was in the Finland game, where she's just standing around in the front of the net taking note. Like she just looks off. And I said this after the American game, that I think there is a significant amount of this, at least on the defensive side and in the coverage in their own zone, that is coaching. The looks that you're giving up to Germany and to Finland, like it's one thing when you give those looks up to the Americans, because sometimes they're going to create those looks for themselves, and then they're probably going to hurt you really bad because they have the shooters to do it. You shouldn't be giving up those looks to Germany. And look, all due respect to Germany, but they're just not close to being on this level. And yet they're getting some chances, and they're pushing Renata Fost out of the zone and beating people back up the ice. I don't know what it's going to take for Kristen O'Neill to get a little bit more ice time. I don't know what it's going to take for Julia Gosling to get a little more ice time. I was happy to see Marie-Philippe Poulin return like everybody else. I did say on the last one of these, I would have held her out in this game. I get it, though. Whether it's her desire to just get back in there or their desire to give her a little more runway to get back up to speed. But she looked uncomfortable anytime the camera was on her on the bench. She didn't look terrible, certainly, on the ice. And I get it. If this is something where she can't do any more damage and it will get gradually better, she's just going to have to tolerate the pain, then fine. But as I said, I would have held her out until the semi. Give her that game to get up to speed. And look, if you can't beat whoever you thought it was. It's going to be Switzerland now, whether you thought it was going to be Finland, whether you thought it was going to be Czechia. Whatever. If you can't beat those teams without Marie-Philippe Poulin at 100%, then you got bigger problems anyway. So I would have let her rest through this quarterfinal, brought her back in for the semis, given her 12 or so minutes, lots on the power play to get her legs back underneath her while the rest of the team takes care of business, and hopefully she's ready for a gold medal game. They bring her back for the quarterfinal. So be it. This team, though, they just don't look... There's something off. And like I said, you can't have Sarah Nurse being as... Like, we were promised Sarah Nurse was going to be fine after that injury. And maybe she is. But it doesn't look like it. Brianne Jenner looks more like the Brianne Jenner we saw last year in the PWHL and not the Brianne Jenner we saw in the first half of this season, where she earned a spot on this team, obviously. Nat Spooner's playing too much. I don't know what they're doing. Jen Gardner, give her some minutes here. Like, let's go. The blue line is whatever. I've vented on this. And this is one of those things that can happen in sports, right? I've come out here. I've said all this now. It has been uninspiring. Frankly, it's sort of how I feel about the American men's team, which we'll talk about in a second. And all of a sudden, somebody goes ahead, has the game of their life, and you end up sneaking out a gold medal, and everybody looks ridiculous for having worried. I don't know. Sure. Like, that's possible. The Americans just kicked the crap out of you in the round robin and in the rivalry series and at World Championships last year. So is it possible that the Canadians can step up, have a great game while the Americans slip on a banana peel in the gold medal game? Yep, it's on the table. This team hasn't given me a whole lot of reason to believe that that's what's about to happen, which is disappointing. And like I said, when I was annoyed with some roster decisions, I didn't think they'd be bad. And I don't know if they've been bad. It's hard to measure. They were bad against the Americans, but they look disengaged or, I don't know, uninspired. So whether it's bad line combinations, bad ice time, it's absolutely partly bad ice time allocation. And how much of it is just this team not clicking at the right time, which, again, can happen. We'll see. And again, when I say we'll see, they're going to beat Switzerland in the semifinal. Like, let's be real. What are you going to look like against the Americans this time? So, speaking of the Americans, the men beat Denmark 6-3 after beating Latvia 5-1. And so on Sunday afternoon, they will take on Germany. I felt a little, I think I alluded to this a minute ago, I feel a little about this American men's team similar to the way I felt about the Canadian women's team so far. They don't look quite right. And I did hear Friedman, and it's something that had crossed my mind as well. Early adversity can be good. You're still getting the wins. You're still in position here to get first in your pool. Maybe if the beatdowns go a certain way on Sunday, maybe first in the tournament going into that qualification round. Quarterfinal round. That's all still on the table. Like, they haven't pissed anything away, right? Like, it's not like when the Finns came out on day one and actually somehow they're going to end up with a decent draw here still, and lose to Slovakia. You're like, what are you doing, right? The Americans have had some moments here where they've been challenged and where they've been pushed. And I mentioned this in a couple episodes leading up to this tournament and through it, that sometimes that's been good for Canada. We think about 2002 when the Swedes beat Canada in the first game of the round robin. 2010, the Americans beat the Canadians in the round robin. And you sort of learn to come together, like whatever shitty sports analogy you want to make, whatever overexposed terminology you want to use that sometimes is correct and is sometimes just a story we want to tell ourselves. It worked out fine for those Canadian teams. Maybe it was always going to, or maybe they got a rallying cry and like, okay, we need to hunker down and we need to get serious and whatever. We need Belarus to beat Sweden for us. The Americans are being tested here. And look, they ended up with a comfortable win over Latvia. But early on, the Latvians held it tight and put up a fight. And that's what you saw to Denmark. I don't really know what Jeremy Swayman was doing on the second goal against. I'm seeing all the same excuses. And look, excuses, reasons, whatever, that you're all seeing. That the boards are darker, that it maybe ticked off his shin pad, his defender's shin pad out in front of him. That was still quite a ways out in front. Like, we see goalies make great saves off in-tight tips all the time. It was just a baffling moment. I saw a lot of people comparing it to the Tommy Salo. Everybody knows I love that one. To me, this one felt more like the Dan Cloutier against the for the Vancouver Canucks against Detroit Red Wings, also back in 2002, if you can believe it. The Canucks are up 2-0 in that series and take it home. And in like the first period of game one, why do I keep doing that? In the first period of game 3, the first game out in Vancouver, Lidstrom hammers one in from center ice and it beats Cloutier. And the Red Wings just roll from there. The Canucks just fall apart. So look, that's the one that it reminded me of. Now, you're not going to see Jeremy Swayman again in this tournament. I can almost promise you. Tomorrow it'll be Hellebuck starting. And I imagine Jake Ottinger backing him up. Because even on the goals that weren't that long shot, Swayman just didn't look right. And I did text Rob after that game, because both he and I had said Swayman would be my guy. That's who I'd start the tournament with. That was a mistake. That's they should not continue the tournament with Jeremy Swayman. Nor do I think that was the plan based on how this is shaken loose so far. But he did not look good. But look, I don't know how many guys you would point to on that American team so far and say that guy is really locked in. They're really cruising. I think you would certainly look at Jack Eichel, who's been fantastic so far. Brady Tkachuk looks like he's bringing it. And maybe Quinn Hughes. Beyond that, have you been impressed by anybody, really? Like, other guys have had their moments. Brock Nelson had a pretty good game in game 1. I don't know. I'm taking... Well, frankly, if I could, I would take both JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck out of my lineup. But you only have one spare. But one of those guys is going out, and Clayton Keller is coming in. Because they're doing nothing. There's something that isn't quite clear. And like I said, maybe later in the tournament, it will do them some good to be able to go, see, we had a tough go. We were down against Denmark, and we didn't beat up on Latvia the way we wanted to. We'll be fine. Stick together, guys. All that kind of stuff. Maybe that will help them later on, but it hasn't helped them so far. And as we sit here, I'm going to talk about Canada in a minute, maybe one of these other two performances that we've seen from a couple other teams, because what happened in that third group with Finland, Slovakia, and Sweden was crazy right to the final minute there. But we are left now with both Canada and the United States needing to win their final games, which they should. They are both heavy favorites over France for Canada and Germany for the U.S. Now, I think you would certainly acknowledge that Germany is a tougher opponent for the United States than France should be for Canada. But I think you would also acknowledge that Canada has had the tougher road so far against a very talented Czech team and, frankly, a pretty good Swiss team that put up a fight themselves and I think surprised a lot of people with how fast they were. But what you're left with is whoever finishes second, if you haven't all already seen this explained to death online, whoever finishes second gets a bye through the qualification round, and then, barring some sort of miracle, will get Sweden in their quarterfinal, which is ugly for Sweden and for whoever finishes second. Look, the Swedes have not been as good as anybody expected, but I don't think you want any part of that in the quarterfinal. They have 3 very good goaltenders who maybe haven't quite shown it yet in this tournament. You have tons of firepower up front and a very experienced and very capable blue line. And so, look, whether it's Canada or the U.S., certainly you take Canada or U.S. if you're putting money on the game to beat Sweden. But it should not shock anybody if Sweden was to do the thing and beat. So you don't want any part of that. If you finish first, you're going to get a Latvia, you're going to get a Switzerland again, maybe. Like there are other teams kind of down in that area that you would certainly feel more comfortable. That isn't one of the world powers. Lots of people pick Sweden to finish on the podium, finish third. You don't want to see them in the quarterfinal. So here's where you're at and how you're going to avoid that. If both Canada and the USA win their game on Sunday, which they should, you will have a tie as both of those teams will be 3-0 in the round robin. The tiebreaker will be goal differential. So whose differential is better? Right now, Canada sits at +9. The USA sits at +7. So the USA has to be 2 goals. I actually don't know what the second tiebreaker is. Like if the US is 2 goals better on Sunday than Canada is, how do they break that tie? I should have probably looked into that before I did this show, everybody. But I didn't, and here I am. If the U.S. scores 2 goals or more than Canada on Sunday against Germany, then they would finish first. If Canada finishes, and again, this has to be with it in mind that both teams win their game, which we all assume they will. But if the USA's win is 2 goals or better than what Canada did, then they will be first. If Canada wins more than what the U.S. did, they will be first. And what that creates is something that a lot of people complain about at the World Juniors especially. When goal differential counts, you have to keep the pedal down. And Canada is at +9, like I said, the U.S. at +7, and that's because Canada's taking care of business a little better, frankly, against better opponents so far, in winning 5-0 and 5-1. The U.S. won 5-1 and 6-3, so they're at +7. And now we are in a place where both of those teams are going to show up and try to kick the snot out of whoever they're playing. Now, Canada goes first. The U.S. will know what they have to do by the time they hit the ice. That Canadian game will be over. If Canada's won their game by 5, they know they need to win by 7, whatever that looks like. And we've seen it play out at World Juniors. We've seen it play out at other tournaments, in other competitions, in other sports. When you are clearly the superior team, but your mind kind of drifts to goal differential, you see some crazy shit. Guys overpassing, trying to make crazy plays. Or the opposite, guys making shots they shouldn't just because they want it to go in. When goal differential gets involved, you know, Canada should beat France, obviously, quite comfortably. But maybe instead of it being 6-1, like it probably should be, it ends up at 3 or 4-1 because guys are just fucking around trying to create these highlight reel goals, which they're capable of doing anyway. Have you seen that power play they've been running out? But things can get kind of nuts. Guys are only human. Now, this is one of the difference between the Olympics and the World Juniors, is you should have far more mature veteran guys that just play the game, stick to our game plan, pucks in deep, 110, blah, 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 blah. It's probably harder for the U.S. unless something catastrophic happens for Canada, where let's say they win 3-2 or something over France. The U.S. can go, we can beat Germany by 3. It's still a hard task. Like, you got some guys, Peterka and Draisaitl, and, you know, Philip Grubauer plays out of his mind. You know, Mo Sider. I'm intentionally leaving a name off just to throw a little elbow at you for Sens fans. You want me to say it, I'm not going to say it. They'll know. But if Canada's put up an 8 spot against France, the Americans go into that game going, there's no shot. You're not beating Germany by 10 or 11, right? So it's sort of, you're stuck waiting around to see what Canada does. And if it's close, if it is something reachable, it it creates a different type of pressure to not just win the game, but do it in a certain way. And they'll say all the right things, just win the game, stick to it, and all this sort of stuff. But it's hard. It's in your mind that we're trying to accomplish a second thing here. So we'll see how that's going to shake loose. I do like for Canada that against better opponents, Switzerland and Czechia, they didn't take their foot off the gas. And in game one, in game two, you're not thinking about goal differential. And frankly, no one was thinking about goal differential till things went haywire in that Finland, Slovakia, Sweden, Italy pool. And now all of a sudden, Sweden, who I think most people thought would finish first, at worst, finished second alongside the Finns. Now Sweden is down and they're going to be in that 7 hole waiting for whoever finishes second overall. And now all of a sudden everybody's looking at that goal differential. Now everybody's like, holy shit. Which monster is Sweden drawing in round 1? Is it Canada or USA? And I keep botching that. It's not round 1. There is a qualification round first. It'll be your quarterfinals. So however you want to shake that loose. It reminds me a little of like the qualification round when we were in the bubble. And was that technically the playoffs or not? Like everyone says the Leafs have made the playoffs for 9 straight years, 10 straight years, whatever it was. The bubble, they didn't technically make the playoffs. They lost that qualification. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. As you guys know, I do that from time to time. So it does matter. I do like, though, like I said, against better competition, that Canada, who wasn't thinking about goal differential at the time, didn't let score effects come into it. In the third period, you didn't see them sitting back and just cruising like you've seen your favorite NHL team do 100 times in your lifetime. You're up 2-1, 3-1 going into a third period, and they sit back and it bites you in the ass every time because you're not attacking anymore. You're just letting the team come at you for 20 straight minutes. Canada did not do that. They kept coming at Switzerland and Czechia. And I think that bodes well for them in a game where, let's face it, they might get a little bored. If it's 3-0 going into the third period, whatever, right? We've got this in the bag. It doesn't matter. It's France. There's no rivalry here. There's not going to be a ton of pushback. They haven't let that mindset sink in yet. So I think this group is set up well to keep attacking, which in a situation like this where goal differential does matter, I think they're, set up well to not let that creep into their game. They will keep doing their thing because they've shown us for 2 games they will keep doing their thing. Anything else on that? Look, I thought Logan Thompson was really good. I would feel more comfortable if they were going to continue with him. They won't. Look, Binnington getting a shutout in game 1 has all but erased any chance of someone else getting the net when we get into the hot and heavy stuff. So that's irritating for me. And I got to be honest, just before I move off of this, I love it because it's fun. I don't love Nathan MacKinnon playing with Connor McDavid. It's a blast. It's 2 of the most talented players ever on a line together with this other kid who's incredible in his own right. I just think it takes a little wow or a little punch out of your lineup a little further down. Like now that Nick Suzuki, and again, I have time for Nick Suzuki on this team, perhaps at center, depending on what you want to do with Horvat. But what made Canada special was McDavid, MacKinnon, Crosby, up the middle, wave after wave after wave. And if it didn't work, MacKinnon was not the guy who was going to lose his own line. And I get it. I told you, I didn't necessarily love MacKinnon with Hagel and Suzuki, but I would have tried Reinhart back up there. And maybe they will on Sunday against France. Some of you will be listening to this after that game, perhaps a lot of you. I just think out of any center on the team, aside from McDavid, MacKinnon is not the one I'm moving onto the wing and moving him up with McDavid. And look, that will be incredible. And they will create chances. But if they happen to go cold, and cold is a very relative term for those guys, but I would rather know if the McDavid line isn't running, well, here comes the McKinnon line. And you've sort of taken that away. And I know you've got a great Crosby, Stone, Marner line. That's worked out really well so far. But I just think now you've got kind of really good NHL players, star NHL players in your bottom six. But it just loses something for me. I would prefer to have that 1 and 2 line at all times, like especially if things get tight, keep rotating through. I got McDavid, then McKinnon, then McDavid, then McKinnon, as opposed to putting them out together and then perhaps having to go a few shifts with neither of them on the ice. And again, all of these are the most first world of first world problems. This roster of forwards is stacked. So I don't want to be alarmist about it. I don't want to say it dooms them. I just like the depth idea a little more than the nuclear weapon idea. But that's just personal taste. Obviously, maybe they just take over the tournament from here and one line's all you need. I got no time right now for the debate that people are trying to force feed on, is this the best line any team has ever put out? Maybe. I'd probably point back to that Gretzky-Lemieux line at 87. You know, there would be others in the conversation over the years. I get it. It's exciting. But this is, I don't know. We don't have to talk about that after a period and a half of it. Like, let's not be those people yet. Sweden, Finland, Slovakia. That was an odd finish on Saturday. The Swedes win the game, but the Swedes are sort of looking downtrodden while the Slovaks are celebrating. If you did miss that, the Swedes needed to win by 3 to win the group. They were up by 3. The Slovaks score one that Markstrom probably should have stopped. And so now the game finishes 5-3, and the Slovaks are pumped. They've won the pool. They will get a better position higher in the rankings when we do the crossover stuff, the quarterfinal stuff. They will be in a better slot. And like we talked about, the Swedes will be down in that 7 hole, which is going to be a tough draw no matter who they get in the quarterfinals. And that'll be after having already had to play in the qualification round, which they should be fine in. Like, I'm not saying they're going to lose in that round. Crazy shit can happen, I suppose. But it is an extra game that they probably weren't really looking to play. And you could see that after they gave up that late goal to drop. It's fun to watch a team pull their goalie while up by 2. It's just so strange, right? Clearly they knew they had to win by 3 and couldn't get it done. Odd moment. But that whole pool was chaos. We saw the Italians hang tough against the Swedes there early on. The Slovaks beat the Finns, and all of a sudden, you've got 3 teams who finish with 2 wins each, and it gets a little nuts. And here we are. That's probably enough for today. You know what? We'll save. The Jays did make a trade. We'll save that for next week or when Rob's in studio at some point there. Jesus Sanchez is now a Toronto Blue Jay. Nice deal. I kind of like it if you're looking for a little spoiler on that. But we'll get to that later. As I said, not sure whether or not we'll do this again after Sunday's action. But one way or another on Monday afternoon, Rob and I will be in studio and we'll get something out either late afternoon or early evening. And if you miss it then, Tuesday morning to start your work week as usual after a long weekend. Thanks for checking this one out. Hope you enjoyed it. Give us a follow on social media at Tall Can Audio. Subscribe to the pod if this is your first time here. We'll see you on Holiday Monday.